Hey guys, I'm here with Andy Tran. He is a founder and managing partner of Arthur Street Ventures. Andy has started multiple businesses in tech, ammunition manufacturing, defense contracting, tequila, which I'm the most interested in, and many others. He's an architect and designer by trade, and even more interesting fact is that Andy was a former undefeated MMA fighter going 6-0 in his career. So, Andy, how's it going?
Good, man. Appreciate you having me on, and kind of weird to kind of hear all that. I feel like I've lived like 10 lives, but it doesn't feel like that some days. It's like you just feel like you're not quite done yet, but it's fun, man. Life's been fun, and you guys are doing great things too. So I appreciate your time and appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah, thank you, man. Thank you for coming on. And it's when you sent me over that, more information about yourself, there was just a lot I learned about you. So it's interesting. And like you have a bachelor's of architecture and a master's of architecture and real estate. I had to write it down, I have to say it, because it's a lot of stuff. So how'd you go from that to starting in ammunitions manufacturing company? How did that all, get started?
Yeah, I wish there was like a formulaic way of I did this and was kind of my next step. But I think with everything in life, you just kind of abandon that you can control it up to a certain point. You can control yourself, you can control what you do, but at the end of the day, you're kind of in an environment that ebbs and flows, even if you don't exist. So, all these things that I'm in is purely opportunistic, and I see something that I like that I can move towards with a lot of passion and tackle it with some type of control over my goals there. And it's the same thing with fighting, right? Like somebody goes in and yes, you can control who you fight and where and all that, but at the end of the day, what matters is what you're going to do once you have those opportunities. And you've seen those types of guys, right? Like somebody gets injured and it's like, hey, you want to fight this guy? You can say no or you can say yes, right? You're never going to be fully prepared. So I think with my education, I didn't really have a choice. I was a terrible student. I really wanted to wrestle in college and had some good offers to wrestle in college, and I just wasn't smart enough to be able to get any type of scholarship. So had a lacrosse coach that was looking at me, and he said, hey, you could come to our school and play some ball and we'll help you get in. And I said, well, do I have to apply? And he said, you don't even have to send us an application. So I was like, perfect. And got there and, it's kind of funny. I actually wanted to be a Pixar animator when I was growing up. But as with every Asian parent, you tell them you want to be a cartoonist and they're like, hell no.
Yep.
So they said, well, why don't you be an architect? And I had no idea what that was. And they're like, you can draw, but you can still kind of make money and have a respectable career. Like, all right, I'll jump in. But man, I was totally not prepared for what design school and architecture school was like. And quite honestly, that paired with when I started training and fighting, it just really took me on a different level of accountability with myself. I mean, typically in high school, everybody kind of has that like, that journey, right? They're partying, they're playing sports, and then they kind of get to college and they're like, okay, who am I? Who am I going to be? And, some people, they point to something, oh, I'm going to be a doctor, an engineer, whatever, but it really doesn't define you. It's your role or your job in the world, but a lot of people go through life without knowing who they are and what they want to be as a person. And for me, all of those things really came to this inflection point. My mom had just lost her company. I didn't have, I didn't have much. We didn't have much, and it was kind of a make or break, and I didn't take out any loans for school. And so I was faced with, well, do I want to drop out of school or do I just buck up, get as many jobs as I can, throw my ego out the door and make some money, pay this thing off and get an education for myself. And that's actually what led me to training and fighting. I took a job as a janitor at a gym, mopping mats, and just how everything came together. I was just really fortunate that my head coach at the time, Nakpan, and I kind of fell into all this, but he was an OG from the Yamasaki Academy in Rockville with Fernando Yamasaki, who obviously is Mario Yamasaki's brother. So I started mopping mats, and he kind of looked at me and was like, "Hey, you look like a pretty smart guy, and I heard you're in architecture school. Like, we need to like set up some mats and figure out how to lay it out." So I literally like drew it on a piece of paper and was like, "Hey, this is how you lay out your zebra mats."
So
And
the school paid off,
yeah,
right?
the
For
school
that
paid off.
moment.
Yeah, for that moment.
Yeah,
He was
yeah.
like, "Hey, look, perfect. I'm paying a janitor, and now he's figuring out how to lay out zebra mats." But quite honestly, that was my first lesson in entrepreneurship because he was a full-time accountant at that point, but he was an awesome fighter, really OG Thai fighter, and wanted to build a business. And we started in the basement of an abandoned church on Columbia Road. And what it was he told me, he's like, "Man, we build a reputation for ourselves. We get some hard fighters in here, and people will come. And we grew that together to an amazing membership size, and we brought in systems, processes, marketing, and it's still there to this day on Florida Ave. But man, as a 17-year-old at that point, 18-year-old, I'm sorry, man, that was like front row seat to just building a business, whether it was a gym or fighting or
A very
whatnot.
difficult business
Very
to start.
difficult business.
Yeah.
And we really sat down and looked at the puzzle of like, okay, how do we train fighters, keep the lights on, but still have a good quality gym? I mean, you guys are in it,
Yeah.
And man, it was to be sitting there in those meetings and figuring that out, even though I had no freaking clue what I was doing. It was just problem solving, man. And I think what fighters do is they don't say no to a challenge, and they're just like, hey, let's just figure this shit out, But how I fell into fighting was I was mopping the mats one night. It was like 10 o'clock, and had earphones on just like this, and was vacuuming the mats before I had to mop them. And Knock comes up to me, and he taps me on the shoulder and take my headphones off, and he's like, "Okay, two things." He's like, "One, the vacuum has been on for like 30 minutes while you're vacuuming. You just didn't know. And two, I heard you're a wrestler. One of the wrestling partners from one of our pro fighters couldn't make it to practice tonight. Do you want to just jump in? He's probably got 30 pounds on you or whatever, but he just needs some work." I'm like, "Hey man, it beats mopping and vacuuming the mats." And he's like, "Oh no, you still have to do that after, but just help us out." So like, okay. And Danny, who's still a good friend, to this day, that was him, and we came up in fighting camp together and in training. But yeah, Knock ran after me after that night and was like, "Hey man, I know you're a really young kid. How old are you?" I was like, "Oh, I'm 18. He's like, "Okay, cool." He's like, You want to learn how to fight?" I'm like, "Sure." And he's like, "All right, come back tomorrow and what do you know about striking?" I'm like, "Man, I've never thrown a punch in my life, but I know how to grapple." And so that kind of set me on that path. But going back to college, I was working 4 jobs, fighting at the same time, trying to build the academy, and also, just coaching, training. You guys know the
Yeah.
deal. It's just the grind. But I had no choice but to be extremely disciplined because I was balancing so many things, and I had to be accountable to those people that I said, "Hey, I'm going to show up on time," because all of these things that I was involved in, they weren't mega corporations, right? They were small teams. They were startups as well. So, just like a fight team, hey, one partner doesn't show up, like it affects how that person trains.
100%. Yeah.
And it was just the accountability as an 18-year-old where people are like, "Hey, we don't care how old you are. Like, you got to be here, and you got to be here early and stay late." And man, it just really defined who I was and who I was going to be. And I'm still a nobody, but it's like, I think it was just a drastic difference from the environment that I was in college, where there was no accountability, right? It was like, "Hey, I'm going to stay out, party my ass off, and if I don't make it to class the next day, whatever." I'm like, "Man, I'm paying those classes out of my own pocket, so I don't I don't care if I'm tired. I don't care, like, if I've got a lot of shit to do. Everybody's got a lot of shit to do. Like, I'm going to show up. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do well and kind of move on. But I kept doing that all throughout my schooling. Man, I had a really fun time fighting and training, met amazing people. At the time, I was fighting under Team Lloyd Irvin, so they came from a crop of, Lloyd is a really OG black belt, Knock kind of shepherded me into the same team as Dominic Cruz, Brandon Vera, and all those guys.
Yeah.
And I was the youngest guy then, but the timing of it was there was no bantamweight flyweight weight class at that point, and actually we couldn't find in DC because the sport at that time was illegal. Maryland was illegal, so
You're showing your age now. Yeah. When you say at one point when it wasn't legal.
Yeah, literally. I mean, it wasn't legal.
Yeah.
It wasn't legal at all. Legislature was
Yeah.
still on there. I mean, this was like the Fertitta brother days, and I say that like it's old, but yeah, I mean, it's what, like 10, 15 years now.
Yeah.
Man, the WC was still in existence, like all of that. And when I was coming up, it was just at that point that, at least when I stopped fighting, it was when the WC got acquired by the UFC. So everyone was kind of looking at me like, dude, here's your chance. Like, they're looking for guys, and you're 19 years old, with 6 fights, like, you got to do this. But I think going back to that self-discipline, I kind of looked at myself and I was like, man, I love fighting. I love martial arts. It's always going to be a part of my life. I've been doing it since I was 4. I still have my gi at my house.
Yeah.
I did judo when I was 4. But more than anything, I loved working with people. I loved building shit, And with fighting, I saw that as a career. And I'm like, man, I love it as a sport. I love the people. I love training. I love all of that, But as a career, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to have the passion to go, to go about it in a way that would be fair to my teammates, would be fair to my coach. I want to be real with everyone and say, hey, man, like, I'll always be here. I'll always train. I'll always, be a fighter in essence. But in terms of a career, that's just not for me. At the same time, it was also because I had started, an architecture firm with my uncle during college. And
You were pretty young. How old were you?
So when we started that, I was 18.
Oh, wow.
I was 18,
Yeah.
and I worked in the firm at the same time, and we grew that to a point where I was like, man, this is really cool, and I love what I'm doing. So, and then at that point, the gym had grown to such a good size that was kind of like my baby too. Seeing the members, seeing the folks come in and train, the new crop of fighters. So I was just like very content with life, and I kind of wanted to replicate, like, okay, how do I go and build more shit, And kept the firm, kept working on it, and came to a point where it grew to a point where it was just running, and at that point, I really wanted to get into something different, and just by chance again, I really love the outdoors, the outdoor industry. I did a lot of mountain climbing, all this stuff, and I started a tech company that started as a planning app, but then quickly, within 9 months, transpired into or morphed into a service that really took social algorithms. And back then it was like, whoa, social algorithms, but now it's just everyday life, right? And what it did was it took people's experiences and then suggested certain gear that you should buy, which now it's like, it's commonplace. But back then, a Fortune 50 company at that point, I don't know if they're still 50 or 100, whatever, but they saw a lot of value in that and wrote me a check. And I looked at the check and I was like, wow, it's a lot of money. But then I realized, I'm like, well, wait a second, like, what do I do now? And I'm not just gonna sit around. Like, I've never been one to sit around. So me being semi-stupid, I said, all right, I'm just gonna put literally every single cent into something else. And that happened to be Muddy Shutter Media, MSM, which was a marketing agency. And
Did you start that? Okay.
Yep,
Cool.
I started that.
Yeah.
in DC, and just really quite frankly, as a selfish way for me to get outside more and hunt, fish, and shoot stuff.
Yeah.
And man, I again, just like any opportunity, I was at a trade show called SHOT Show out in Vegas, and I was kind of walking around, and I was at a booth, and this dude comes up to me, and he's like, "Hey, man, I really got to ask you, what's your deal?" I'm like, "What?" I thought this dude was gonna like square up to me or something, and he's like, "Nah, man, what's your deal?" He's like, "You're the only Asian guy I've seen at this show." He's like, "So, like, what's your story?" I'm like, "What's your story?" He's like, "Well, I make ammo in my mom's garage." I'm like, "Okay, that's pretty different. That's cool." And he's like, "What do you do?" I was like, "Man, I don't really know. I just started this like media marketing thing, and I'm just trying to get this thing up and running too." And lo and behold, Drew has become one of my best friends, and um, he called me one day and was like, "Hey, man, how do we launch this ammo company?" And I'm like, "I have no freaking clue as to, I don't even know anything about making ammo. But he's like, "Man, let's just do it." And that's grown to, in 4 years, it's grown to an eight-figure company. It's pumping out millions and millions in shells. We just opened up our manufacturing facility out in Tennessee, and you know, it it was awesome, and we spun that into our center fire defense rounds in 2020. And again, no business doing that. We had no clue how to make center fire cartridges like 5.56, 9 mil.
Yeah.
But we just hedged our bets, man, and that was January of 2020. And man,
That was a good time
oh yeah,
great time to start that.
great time.
Yeah.
But hey, like go big or go home. It was like, hey, are we gonna start this? And if we did, and at that point, like there are so many huge ammo manufacturers in the world, so a lot of these people, to take us seriously, we had to go big, because they're like, why would I work with you when I can work with the other guys that are multi-billion-dollar corporations? So we just got scrappy. And man, things hit just right, timing hit just right. COVID happened, people freaked out, and people bought a ton of ammo. And it was a pretty cool call when one day a buyer calls up and he's like, "Hey man, how much ammo you got?" And we're like, "How much you need?" And he's like, "All right, we'll take a pallet." And we're like, "Damn, that's a lot of ammo." And then he calls back. He's like, "Actually, I just talked to my boss. He's like, we need 2 truckfuls every week." We're just like,
Wow.
okay, like let's do this. So that was 2020, and now we're rolling, and it's a fun business, and there's so much fun to be had, and riding around helicopters and shooting stuff and testing things and running around with knife. It's just fun.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting the leading up to that too, because that's always a question, like how do people get into that? Nobody has just a simple story. It seems like there's a lot of opportunities
Yeah.
with martial arts. It was the same thing with you. You had a wrestling background and you were cleaning the mats, and there was an opportunity there. And it seems like it's like very similar with the situation with the ammunitions company as
Yeah.
well. And I think that you also, like, having some general skills, having those skills puts you in positions to land better opportunities.
Yeah.
So I mean, you've probably met really cool people during this process of the ammunitions manufacturing business. Like, what are some of the people that you've been working with, or some of the bigger companies that you've been working with that kind of surprised you, or that you've been really fortunate to have worked with so far?
Man, I feel like that's such a loaded question because I've met so many awesome people, super interesting folks. I can't really pinpoint one person. I mean, a really cool project was us working with an agency that trained a lot of good folks, and I'm trying to be vague to just kind of maintain operational security and stuff. But I was able to go over to South Africa to oversee a few shipments of gear, we'll just call it, and was able to ride around in a lot of cool places that even the world's dignitaries haven't been to, just because of the level of corruption that they face. And man, I was able to see some really cool things. And part of that unit, they pretty much go after these different syndicates. So that was a really cool unit. And then one that I can't speak about was probably one of my best experiences was a narcotics team on the Colombian Colombian Ecuadorian border. Their task was to solely hunt down narco subs, and it's a real thing. Like the cartels will pay engineers like millions of dollars to be in a forest, literally in the jungle for like 2 years or a year to build these crazy narco subs, and they look like pods. But man, these like people think they're hard and they're tough. Man, these dudes that are living in the jungle down there and hunting these guys, like it's insane, And I remember going down there, and this particular unit, I'm kind of looking at the dock as they're loading up their boats, like literally like little kayaks, and there's this unit coming in, and he's got like some plantains and some like sugar cane and a machete, and I'm like, hey, how long are you guys going for? They're like, oh, like 3 months. I'm like, where are all your supplies? He's like, this is it.
Wow.
This is it. Like everything else we need down there, that's the jungle provides, And I'm just like, holy shit, like that's crazy. It's just a whole new level of resourcefulness and just you think that you're in an environment that's tough, and you go down there and you see that, and you're like, damn, I have no freaking clue what tough is yet. But that was again that was some of my favorite memories. But
And in just a short period of time, because it's not like you've been doing this for 20, 30 years. This is it's the last handful of years.
Last 5
years. Yeah, I mean, fast forward another 10, 15, 20 years of doing this. I'm sure you're going to have a lot more stories at that point.
Yeah, and I hope the stories don't stop, because I feel like that's what really inspires me to get up every day and
it's an adventure. Yeah, it's an adventure. Yeah.
And I mean, it's like fighting, man. Like there's days where you're just, it's the same thing every day. You're going to the gym, you're hitting the bag, you're doing the same thing, but it's not that you're working towards. You're working towards these big moments, and they don't come very often. And I think that's also something that fighting really taught me, was like, you got to put in your dues, man, because that moment will come. You don't know when it is, but you got to be prepared. And it's just like a fight camp. Like, hey, that fight might be 6 months out, 3 months out, whatever. Like, you have to have the discipline to stay sharp, work on yourself, and when you get up to that point or that big moment comes, you're prepared, and you have really no one to blame but yourself. Now, you could have the best coaches and all that, but man, fighting is at the core a battle between you and who you want to be and who you can be. And, people can help you. People can, throw water on you to get you up to wake up early and go on your run. But man, if that stops, if those people aren't there, you're the one that has to go and do it. And man, it's this realization that translates to everything in life. Because hey, sometimes like, you're going to have a career, you're going to fight and all that, but what happens after that, right? Like, are you going to have the same mentality? Are you still going to be a fighter, even though you're not a fighter on paper and in a career? It's like, how does that mentality bleed through and you kind of tackle anything like that? But that's why I see fighters and athletes being extremely successful. They're very entrepreneurial at heart, and they go after what they want, and they work for what they want. Man, that was just totally a tangent there. But
yeah, no, I because when we had this conversation like last week, and I mean, it was, we could probably talk for hours about this, about how like mixed martial arts training relates to life and business, and all the laws and those things. So it seemed like that you were on this path regardless of training and competing in mixed martial arts. Do you think that's influenced you a lot? Because I think that you're the type of person that you'd be somewhere. Maybe not exactly here, but do you think that's influenced you a lot, training mixed martial arts into your entrepreneurial career?
Oh man, like absolutely. I think that is something that I attribute very much with what I'm doing right now. And at one point, to bring it back into fighting terms, you can train in your garage by yourself and hit the bag and look in the mirror and be like, yeah, I'm tough. I'm I'm doing UFC, you know. But there's a point where you graduate and you get into a room in a Shark Tank with some real dudes that have real training. You're like, man, I don't know shit. Like, I'm getting worked. And that's where, you know, you have to check your ego at the door with anything in life. And just say, man, there's some dudes that are better than me. I got to go through it. I got to, you know, I got to take it and learn from it and get my ass whooped, because that's how I'm going to learn. And I can't shy away from that. It's like a white belt wanting to be a black belt. Man, you got a long road to go. You're going to get your ass kicked for years before you earn that belt. And there are some guys that will come in and say, oh, I've done this, I've done this, I've done that. You know, oh, I did this, and I had this fight, that fight. It's like, okay, cool, man. Get in the cage with that guy. Like, let's see how all of that has worked for you. And same thing with business. You know, I see it all the time. It's like, oh, yeah, I was a previous CEO of this company or that company, or in this case, you know, it was like this one person was a CEO at a food company, right? But we were an ammo company, and I was like, hey, man, respectfully, I'm not trying to, you know, discount what you've done, but what the fuck does donuts have to do with ammo, man? And he's just like, like his ego was so hurt. I'm like, no, for real. I'm like, how does it translate over to what we're trying to do? And that's a $1 billion company. You have all these resources. You have all these people. We got 3 people. Like, it's a different ball game, man. And it's kind of like somebody that comes in and they're like, well, in order for me to be a good fighter, I need a nutritionist. I need this. I need this. I need the best that. And it's like, well, what if you don't have that? Are you still going to train your ass off? Are you still going to make do? You know?
It's like their conditions have to be perfect for them to be able to do that.
But it's like an ego thing.
Yeah, for sure. Like, well,
because I want all that. Right?
Yeah.
And I think with Instagram or whatever social media nowadays, people have painted that picture that it's like, hey, look at me, I'm an entrepreneur. It's on my profile, so automatically I've earned this, you know, or oh, I'm going to put on here that I'm a fighter or a boxer, or blah, blah, blah. And it's like, dude, you're not fooling anybody, man, because it's kind of like my coach just told me, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. You know, it's like, well, once you get punched in the face, are you going to stick with your plan and have discipline, the muscle memory? Did you train well enough to stick with the plan? And some people, they'll talk about a plan, they'll talk about all the shit that they can do, and then when that, I mean, you guys know when that cage clicks, you know, and you're staring that other dude, you're like, man, I'm going through a lot of shit in my head right now, you know. But
yeah, it's like the same thing too. It's like everyone feels they're really tough and they know everything until they get punched. You know, like that was me, and I wasn't a bad person. I just thought I was a lot tougher than I was.
Yeah.
And when I, you know, and I'm like, oh, I could take this guy, right? I mean, he's like maybe like a freaking amateur with a couple fights or whatever. I'm like, I could take him.
Yeah.
And then I, you know, get in there with a guy that's, you know, only sparred a handful of times and get my ass kicked. I'm like, shit, it's that humble pie. But then it gives you a way that you kind of look at everything differently at that point. You're like, I'm lying to myself. Yep. I've been lying to myself for a long time. And I think that's been the best part of training martial arts so far for me, is that it exposes you very quickly. And then if you could either crumble, or you could say, hey, I'm going to learn. I'm going to be a sponge. I'm going to take this all in. I'm going to come back and I'm going to kick that guy's ass. Yeah. And when I start kicking his ass, I'm going to go to the next guy whose ass I can't kick, and I'm going to you know, work with him and stuff. So I think that yeah, I mean, I've learned a lot myself. And I think that admitting that has helped me a lot too. So so going off of that too, so taking a lot of skills that you've learned with martial arts and you know, in helping start that business, that, you know, initial you know, really getting it off the ground, that initial MMA gym, you had to build a lot of leadership skills.
Oh yeah.
And you said, I took this thing and I just wanted to do more. I wanted to go out there and venture out and just do some bigger things and stuff. Running a lot of businesses and having that experience that you did, you had to build up a lot of leadership skills. What are some of the skills that you found has been the most important, you know, so far in your entire journey?
Super packed question, but I think when it comes to leadership in specific, man, it's ego. You can't lead with ego. Maybe for a short term, but for a long term, you know, you're really only hurting yourself. And you know, maybe some people disagree with that, But I think to be a good leader, you got to be very cognizant of yourself. You got to know your strengths and weaknesses, right? And case in point, let's look at the Navy SEALs. Like all of those guys are leaders. All of them are by themselves. They're some killers, right? But they all have roles. There's a breacher, there's assaulter, all medic, all that stuff, and they're all dangerous dudes. But the best and the greatest attribute is their team, and that's what a leader has to recognize is, the power of one is good, but the power of that same person multiplied over a certain scale is even better, if not, best. And I think going back to martial arts, like you said, man, like you're not going to have the time in the day to be the master of everything. And the sooner somebody learns that, the better, and they can work on themselves, right? It's kind of like any fighter. For them to go in and say, I'm going to be the best at everything, sure, they can work towards that, but that's not going to be the same as that one guy working on that one thing but that's where great coaches come in, right? Is, hey, look, let's look at your strengths, let's look at your weaknesses. How do we translate it to a game plan? Like, how do we actually use that to win? Because if you are so bullheaded and you say, hey, I'm going to beat this guy at his own game and I'm going to not, like, sure, you can do that, right? 100%. But I think the smart teams are like, hey, what is our end goal, right? Like, we're trying to make this money, we're trying to succeed, we're trying to win this fight, then here's our game plan. And you need to surround yourself with people that can analyze you and say, hey, man, look, just like any fights, like, your shoulder drops when you throw that cross, blah, blah, blah. He's going to exploit that weakness. You need people to check you like that, instead of saying, no, man, dude, I'm the best striker. It's like, well, he's a pretty good one too, and he's going to exploit this, much like grappling or whatever. You need those guys to sit you down and watch through that game tape, right?
And their response is very important too.
Yes.
Like
100%.
when you see people, when you, and you give them that constructive criticism, and just even teaching basic boxing classes to high-level fighters, you see this on all levels. I know the one that you go in there and you're like, hey, just do this, don't drop that, that lead hand, when you're bringing it back, and they're like, yeah, okay, and they keep on making that same mistake versus like somebody that's really interested in what you're saying, and then they fix it. That person's going a much longer way.
100%.
I could see 6 months from now with that person versus the other one.
And that's a great thing you mentioned that, because back to your original question of like, what are these skills that I think are most important? Communication. And man, as an 18-year-old trying to teach Muay Thai to people that have no clue what that is, it really made me understand how to communicate with people. But also check my own ego, because if you're like, hey, throw this combo, blah, 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 and do this and overcomplicate it for them, they're like, this is my first day. I'm like a nurse. Like, I have no, like, I don't even know what a teep is. Like, what is that, So you have to really analyze yourself and say, well, what is that goal that person wants to achieve, and build on small wins, and for example, okay, this person comes in, they want to learn how to box or they want to learn how to fight. The good coaches are going to say, okay, that's your goal, but here's everything you got to learn to get there, right? And even with throwing a simple punch, like, you're not just like, hey, punch straighter. It's like, what does that even mean, man? It's like, but being able to communicate and walk them through these steps and teach fighting and martial arts down to, body science, body motions. Like, okay, hey, this kick could be better. Instead of telling them kick harder, you say, hey, man, go on the balls of your feet and turn your hip, use your shin. You do that, you'll create more power, instead of just saying, hey, hit it harder. It's like, well, I don't know how to, right? So,
and that's like that lack of patience, because it's like part of that, there's a million things that you could say, about a good leader, but part of that communication is having patience in how you teach people, and then everybody learns at a different rate.
Yeah.
Like I could tell a fighter that has a lot of experience, kick harder, and he knows what that means. But somebody that's a little bit newer, they don't know. You got to break down the science a little bit, and you got to have the patience to do so. Yeah. Everyone learns at a different rate.
And that translates to business as well, right? Because you can stand up there in a meeting and go, guys, we need more revenue. We need more money. And everyone's like, all right, we need to generate more revenue. It's like, Okay, well, how are we getting there?
Right.
We need to make more money every month. It's like, that's the goal, but give me solutions, and so I think a lot of coaches, when it comes to martial arts, it's like they get angry and they tell people what they want the solution, what they want the goal to be, but they're not patient enough to coach people through how to get there. And I think that is something that also, fighting taught me, of that skill of communication. And it's easily translatable from coaching somebody, an absolute novice or a pro or whatever. And also you learn how to really give that constructive criticism. And, even as fighters, like, and, there's kind of that brotherhood of like, dude, you suck, like
Yeah,
as a joke,
right,
but,
right.
but
Yeah.
like good team members will be like, hey man, like you need to do this, you need to tweak this, like, hey, this is how you can get your lock to be a little, a little bit tighter. The guys that are bullheaded will be like, dude, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. It's like, I would like to see where their career is at, because there's always an improvement point with anything in life. And I think the sooner somebody realizes that there's always something to improve on, something to learn on, like the faster and more exponentially they will get better, because they're looking for those things.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. And one thing that I've seen very common with a lot of successful people that I've met in my life that I've been fortunate to have is that the best leaders are the best followers too. Like there is a saying, I don't know, it's a quote. It's lead when required, follow when you must.
Yep.
And sometimes you're the alpha, sometimes you're not. And I think that knowing when to take the reins. If I'm teaching a boxing class, I'm a pretty good coach. But if I have Marcus come in, he's taken over. Now I'm learning from him, and I'm okay. I drop the ego. I'm like, I enjoy that. I mean, I'd love it actually if he could take over every class and I could learn from it for the next 2 to 3 years. He doesn't have the time to do that, but I felt that that has been one of the biggest key things that I've realized is just the best leaders are the best followers.
Yeah, 100%. And that's a great point, because people always ask like, hey, how do you grow a business? How do you scale it to X millions of dollars or this much or that much? How do you get there? What do I have to do? What do I have to do? It's like, man, it's not really what you have to do. It's what you need to get other people to do. And that is to be a leader, because you can't scale your systems if it only revolves around one person. It might scale to a certain size, right? But once you install more leaders, you install more people that are on the same page as you, and maybe not the same skill, level, but they'll get there. Like, now you're doing much more at a way bigger level, right? And as those guys learn and just get better, your whole enterprise gets better. Let's take, for example, what you just said about classes, right? Okay, one coach can coach, let's say, 8 classes a day, right? And if he's like, man, I got to coach, like it's just me that's going to do this. But from a business perspective, let's say, just say from the gym, if he were to just teach one more person, he's doubling his class from 8 classes to 16 classes, right? 2 more dude, like you see what I'm saying? And once the leader lets go of that perfection, and really no one's perfect. It's the illusion of perfection, because they have an ego. They think they're perfect, so nobody can emulate them, right? It's like, man, once people let go of that, it's like your business just takes off. And then in turn, those guys and gals, they create more leaders, and it's like that exponential spider effect. And kind of like you said earlier, it's like, man, it's only been 5 years since I've been doing all this, but you can't do all this by yourself. You got to find people that can align with you and be on that journey, and just help scale and help build these things. And it just comes down to, ego checks, man. I know egos. I don't even know if we're gonna like tally this at the end of the show, but it's like, ego checks are so important in business and in fighting.
Yeah, it's important to stress those things. Like sometimes you got to say things more than once. And I've learned that sometimes it's better to be reminded than to be taught something new. And I think that that repetition is very important, because I hear that with everybody. It's like check the ego, and then it's like, that is like the foundation, I think, of being a good leader.
Yeah.
You got to have an ego to a degree, but I think that you got to like have this humble part of your ego. I think it's really important.
Yeah. And for me, I think there's a big difference between confidence and ego.
Yeah, for sure.
Confidence is you knowing yourself that you can repeat your success over time. Ego is you don't know it, but you are just saying that it's going to happen. And that's different. Confidence is like, man, I've been here before. I've done this. I could repeat it. That totally different than an ego. An ego is you walk in the door and you don't have any data. You don't have any past experience or whatever. And you're just like, yeah, I'm going to do this. And that sometimes that helps. Sometimes it's great to have an ego. But there's a point where you get to a certain level. Like every fighter, you look at the UFC, right? Ton of egos there. And that's awesome. But those guys are all on a different level, right? And that's what makes that competition so good to watch.
Yeah.
You see the egos, but you also see the confidence. And so that's kind of like that perfect mix of competition, Like
and some people like will do all the right things, be the sponge, learn, grow, and they get to a certain point and they feel like they're the master and they got to stop learning. I think that's a huge mistake, because at that point they're like, okay, I know this stuff. You see this, in whatever factories and stuff. You have the guy that's like was there for like 30 years, like, he's kind of cutting corners, like, oh, you don't need to do this, you don't need to do that. No, do it my way. It's a lot easier and stuff. Yeah. Those guys were great at one point. They learned their craft, but then they just stop learning and they cut corners, and it reflects in business.
Yeah.
And it's a chain reaction, at that point.
Oh yeah. Complacency kills, man. Complacency kills. And the day that you stop doing something because you think it's good enough, or, oh, this is kind of how we've always done it, that's when you metaphorically get knocked out. Like that's when somebody comes along that probably has no business being in that business, and they just clock you, and you're on the mat being like, what just happened? And it's like, hey man, we told you, like, if you didn't pay attention to that wasn't going to happen. Same thing with business. Oh no, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. We've done this for so long. This is what we do. And then somebody comes along, flips that on their head, and then you're like, man, you got no one to blame but yourself at that point. And Knock, my coach, had a great saying, and he's like, never wish any fighter or even yourself or anybody luck. He's like, you don't do that, because luck, if you're banking on luck to win that fight, you haven't put in the work. You got to be prepared. And when you go into that cage, you're not relying on luck, because luck is thinking that something's going to come and save you. Like in that cage, there's no such. There might be some luck, so what would people say as lucky, but I don't think so. Because it's literally one for one, two people's actions, and all those actions are intentional.
That's why they say good skill.
Yeah,
good skills.
100%. It's like preparation. Preparation is what you need to rely on, not luck. And man, that's just stuck with me over everything that I've done, man. It's like you minimize as many variables as you can, and just like training camp, like if you set yourself up for success, from small things like packing your gym bag, making sure your proteins and your, you guys know the deal. It's like making sure your stuff's wrapped and you got this and you got that, instead of every single day you're scrambling. Where's my shit? Where's my mouth guard? Mentally, it's like you're trying to reinvent the wheel over for yourself. And it's like, set yourself up for success. Don't rely on luck. Like, prepare yourself. And I think the successful fighters and even business people that I've seen, they do that. They show up to the gym every single time. They got the same routine. They're warming up. They're active in their learning. They're active in their training, and they're not coming in and saying, "Hey, like, what are we doing today?" Like, all right, cool, that's what we're doing. Okay, and it's just being proactive in what you want to achieve, and being kind of the leader of your own destiny. But yeah, that's just kind of my thought on that.
Yeah, it's I love talking about this stuff because it helps remind me. And you forget sometimes, you just busy and everything, and it's just like you forget these little like key things that just pulls everything together. It's kind of to talk about all these things where you started. It doesn't seem like you're doing much different when you started the MMA gym, getting off the ground, to what you're doing with the ammunitions company, to what you're doing with the tequila company. It seems like it's all the same stuff, but you're just doing a little bit more. You're just getting a little bit better.
Yeah.
Sometimes when people look at something like, if I have never done anything in my life, like I want to start a tequila company, right? That's probably a really big step to do that just right off the bat. But if you start with something small, you started in the basement of of somebody's house or whatever, or some gym or warehouse or whatever, and you started there, and then you found what worked, and you move on to the next thing that was slightly bigger. You found that worked.
Yep.
I think that when people think about something like, oh, it must be nice starting a tequila company, or it's how, they must have had money or whatever. It's like, no, I did this, and I moved on to the next thing, and it was a little bit bigger. And I moved on to the next thing, it was a little bit bigger. And it just it seems like the recipe is the same. You're just a little bit better at all those like main skills that you need to run a business.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And it's I think with anything, not losing that mentality of being scrappy and going after what you want, and just getting your hands dirty, man. And I think that's what fighters do. They just see something, they see the goal, and they're like, all right, like, let's do it. Let's train. Let's learn. Let's get after it. And what do we need to do to get these small wins to get to that big win? And it's kind of like somebody going in and thinking they're going to have a title fight right away, right? It's like, that's not how it works, man. Like, you got to put in your dues. You gotta go through some shit to get there. Now there might be some guys that they could kind of take that shortcut and somehow get a title fight very early, but I think it's few and far in between, and I think people shouldn't rely on that, right? It does happen, but I think even with the tequila, it's like, and for the record, I didn't start the brand. I have an awesome partner, Drake. He's the founder, and man, he worked on that thing for 8 years before it launched. Right?
Wow.
But for him, it was, I don't want to launch it until it's an amazing product. He went to 66 distilleries. He knocked on all those doors. He almost had a very similar path, and I feel like if it was a movie and you watched the two of us together, like our timelines, he was doing that in college while I was kind of doing my thing. But, now 12 months into our launch, like all of that effort, all of that time compounds. And within 12 months, we're overshooting all of our metrics, right? And back when we started, people were like, hey, you're going to be lucky to make 1,000 cases in your first year, like if you're lucky, because that's what the metric is. And, we were like, okay, like if that's the metric, like that's what we shoot for. And now we're 5X that, right? So it's like,
wow.
Okay, one, we're learning that don't listen to people that aren't in the fucking arena with you. And two, like, don't tell people how you're going to perform, because ultimately they don't control that. You do. And how we controlled that was, man, we just put in work. We just went in, shook people's hands and said, hey, this is us. We're here to work, man. We're here to build these partnerships. We don't have any egos. How do you want to work together? Whereas right now in the tequila market, it's extremely celebrity heavy. So a lot of these brands come into restaurants and distributor relationships, and they're like, you don't know who I am? Well, you got to buy my tequila. And these guys are like, I don't want to buy your tequila. Like they get off put by that, So for us to come in and say like, man, we want to work with you. They're like, really? Like that's new. And they're like, how big are you guys? Or, like, how big's your team and who owns you guys? And we're like, nobody owns us. It's the two of us. This is it. Drake works out of a broom closet in Austin, and I work out of a warehouse in Cleveland. Like, it's just real, and I think people respect that. And I think that's why we have done so well and that's all relative, right? But we have done much better than anybody would have expected, because we put in the work that nobody expected us to put in. And I think that's how you make a dent in things and make a difference and get out there and get after things. But for us, it's like, okay, cool. 12 months, we've got some good success, and we're nowhere where we need to be yet. We have a goal in 5 years to do X, Y, Z. Like, let's do that. But we're also, it's not beneath us to go and do things like tastings or getting in front of people. Like there's a event down at Loss tonight. Like, sure, we can go hire, a bartender or whatever to go do it, but man, like I'm at a certain mentality where if you're not willing to get in the trenches, you're not willing to do something yourself as a leader, you can't delegate that to somebody, And it's like, we're going to go do it. We're going to sit there, we're going to be blasted with that uns music and do our thing. It's like,
And people are surprised by that too, because that's not something you expect. You expect, somebody that owns a tequila company to have a bunch of really good looking girls that are just standing around giving out free drinks. But I think that it's a much stronger approach for you guys to get there in the trenches with everybody.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great presentation. And you guys are in great bottle. I mean, who came up with the logo and?
So we worked with a great group out of Austin called Helms Workshop. So they did like Southern Comfort to Covas and all that. They did an amazing job. Drake has worked on this for a long time. And he came up with the bottle design and everything. I can't take any credit for that. It's a really strong brand. But, our partners are great. Yeah, go ahead. Nine it all the whole time.
Yeah, are you so I'm gonna try this.
Yeah, do it. Here, I'll do it with you.
Yeah.
Kind of walk you through the profile. Everyone's like listening to this, like, wait.
Yeah.
This is taking way too many crazy angles. Cheers.
Yeah. I'm an amateur pourer too, by the way.
Right, you're good. So it's
That's great.
It's our añejo is it's aged 15 to 18 months, and it's just an awesome product, and it's really great for the American palate because it's aged in ex-bourbon barrels. So that's how we introduce a lot of people to this is, hey, you like whiskey? You like, bourbon? Oh, yeah, I love it. Do you like tequila? Oh, man, I haven't drank that since my college year. It's like, if you like whiskey, you like bourbon, try this. And they're like, whoa.
If I was doing a blind taste test, I would. It tastes similar to tequila, or sorry, to whiskey.
Yeah,
I love whiskey.
Yeah,
and this stuff is really good.
Yeah, it's very. They say it's barrel forward, but we and I'm not trying to get too nerdy into the science of it.
Oh, get nerdy. Because I mean it's cool.
I'm still an amateur. I don't know anything about anything. There's some dudes down there that just know so much more, but I've really fallen in love with it. Just like anything. It's there's just such a science to it, and you might notice that the tequila is a little bit thicker, and they call it viscosity. It almost feels like you're drinking like a liquefied honey, and that's because we don't filter it as much because the agave plant is naturally really fatty, but they removed that. But we actually kept it, so it just helps. It coats the mouth, it coats the tongue. Like it's just really pleasant to drink. And the more you drink, actually, it gets smoother because of that effect. So that's just like one thing that Drake really dialed in over the years because he didn't want to go into a saturated market with the same crap that everybody was drinking. And actually, we're completely additive free. And, people don't know this, but probably a ton of the tequila that they're tasting is like really bad for you because they're putting in sugars, chemicals, additives, all that to mask bad tequila. But man, going back to fighting, kind of crazy that we're talking about tequila and fighting, but there are a lot of brands out there that take the shortcut to try to be a good product. And what they do is they try to force the agaves to just, think about this, right? Think about cooking cooking a steak over an open fire versus cooking in a microwave. Mm-hmm. Which one do you think is going to taste better, right? It's like up to a certain point, but that's kind of the same thing with tequila. It's like some folks will try to nuke it. Literally, that's what they do. They put in what's called an autoclave. They literally try to nuke it and pretty much like it's like a big pressure cooker, and they force it all out instead of what we do, which is we roast it in an oven. We just go about a different method that takes time, and that's what builds quality, right? It's like just like fighting. It's like, dude, you're not gonna go in here and hit the bag for 5 minutes and suddenly like you're a good fighter. Like, gotta take that time and process to it.
Yeah, man. Like normally when people talk stuff up and I try it, I'm like, you had to talk it up for me to kind of like, yeah. But that's something like you taste it, and that stuff that you said afterwards, it's great. I mean, I think it's awesome. The quality is there, but I didn't need to even hear that to know that it's good tequila.
Yeah.
It's like you taste it. This is some of the best tequila I've had, and it's very hard to get into Ohio, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of challenges there.
Oh, yeah.
You guys are in Ohio now.
Correct. Yep. So we launched in June in Texas, and then we're statewide in Texas, Florida, and now in Ohio. And typically the process takes about 2 years. We were able to get in 6 months.
How?
We just kind of going back to that grittiness. It's just you shake hands, you make the right connections, and you take the ego out of it, right? And you just say, hey, man, like, we're trying to get into the state. We don't know how to. How do we do that? And you listen, and they're like, hey, man, here's kind of how you do it. And you kind of take that information and you distill it. I mean, I wrote a 200-page paper on why we should be in Ohio. So they call it a listing justification, where you have to justify why you want to be listed. And we wrote like a 200-some page paper. And with that being said, you have to lay out a plan, right? Just like anything. And that's kind of like somebody walking through the gym and they're like, hey, I want to be a champion one day. And you're like, okay.
Right.
Like,
I want to start a tequila company.
Yeah,
okay.
let me hear your plan. They're like, I don't have any. I'm just gonna be a champion one day. You're like, all right, let me sit you down. But with the tequila is, we had to garner a lot of support, and we had to put in the work to say, hey guys, like, we need your support. We're a small brand. We're trying to get here. We're trying to do damage in Ohio. And we know that it's gonna pay off. And a lot of people are like, Ohio, like, what? But they don't know this, and I'm giving free tips away probably to our competitors, but Ohio is the number 7 in top tequila consuming states. It's a lot, right? And people are like, wait, what? But pretty much 50% of the most tequila drinking states are neighbors of ours. And from a business perspective, you're like, wait a second, hey, why isn't anybody looking at this, But then it goes back to ego. Everybody wants to win the big crown states, Texas, Florida, California. But it's like, man, ego check yourself. Why do you want to be there? Oh, it's nice and shiny. It's like, man, $1 you're making in California is the same dollar you're making in Ohio. And obviously, I'm just kind of speaking simply. It's like one bottle moved in Ohio, same as one bottle moved in Texas. Like it furthers your business goals. So for us, it was, what is the path of least resistance? How do we win our neighborhoods? It's kind of like, just fighters here locally in Cleveland. It's like, okay, you get that support group around you and you will succeed. Instead of going elsewhere and you're saying, no, I'm going to get these other people that have no clue who I am, and I'm going to get them to support me. And it's like, man, get the people around you to support you, build up that following, and then go to that place, because then it's going to be easier for people to support you. So,
oh yeah, man. I mean, this stuff's great. I mean, it's I love the backstory to that. You got it in Ohio, so it's going to be at bars, and you buy it like a local grocery store. Where is this going to be at?
Yep, Giant Eagle, Minotti's. We're literally just go on ohlq.com and it'll pull it all up. But we're in a ton of restaurants. One of my favorites is Marble Room. And
that's a beautiful place. It was one of the
awesome
best. It's a beautiful restaurant, and it's like a huge waiting list to even go there.
Yep.
I went there last year for the first time. It was a great experience. So this will be at Marble Room too.
Yep. And we just actually had a party there with Machine Gun Kelly maybe 2 months ago.
Nice.
So that was really fun and kind of a surreal moment. But I think Cleveland's just really rallied around this brand. Because one, there's not a lot of competition up here in terms of tequila, because it is so hard to get into Ohio. But we really doubled down and invested into it, both from a personnel perspective, but also from a capital perspective. And it's here, it's moving very well. And in Ohio, you have kind of like a probationary period of 90 days. And, we blew through that, and we were at 6-month numbers at 2 months in, so it's like the power of connections and the power of your community is so strong here. And we're trying to replicate that instead of trying to go and be, you know, mile wide, inch deep. It's like, man, dude, we got to do the opposite. You know, we got to double down on people and create those relationships, because that's who's going to move the needle for you. You know, I mean, it's kind of like fighting. Like you have like your fans, right? But it's like, man, like we want people to be diehard people that will support you throughout your career. Like they're going to be there from your first amateur fight all the way to when you win your UFC title belt. You know, it's like you need those people, because that's who moves you throughout your career and through your success, and not the flaky folks that just want to be seen and heard, and then the first sign of trouble, it's like boom, they're gone. So I think, you know, Cleveland just has that mentality.
Oh yeah,
you know?
it's like that ground up mentality, you know, and it's like I think that you guys are doing the right thing, and it's like I think it's, especially here being in Cleveland, I think it's a lot more meaningful for you to be as involved as you are. Like you'll be at Lost tonight, you know, promoting this brand. I mean, honestly, anybody could do it, because it's like I said, it's good stuff. I'm thankfully I started drinking it later on, because I don't know if I'd be able to answer all these questions. No, but it's good stuff. And so you guys will be there tonight. Like, what's the deal tonight at Lost? Like, what are you guys gonna be doing there?
It's just kind of like an event, and I think it's like Latin night or something like that, which is, you know, with tequila. But yeah, we're just there. We're there to shake hands and kiss babies, so to speak. And,
Yeah.
give people a try, and the important thing is actually talk to people. You know, instead of like, hey, here's a shot. It's like, hey, man, you like tequila? What's your story, dude? Where are you from? You know, what's your name? I'm Andy. Blah blah. This is our brand. You know, that's how you build that support. You know, and just not like, hey man, here, take tequila. You like it? All right, go buy it. It's like, I don't know you.
Right.
Who the hell are you?
Yeah.
So it's just you want to convince people and be there as somebody that they would want to associate themselves with. And actually, our name La Caza is Spanish for the hunt. And I mean, I love hunting. Drake loves hunting. That's kind of our background. But when we really looked at it, you know, we thought that was a great unifier of a certain caliber of people. Is guys and gals that will go out there and hunt something that they want, you know, like they're gonna go and eat what they kill, and that's kind of that subtleness that we wanted in the brand. Was like, hey, who are those folks that if they were sitting around in this podcast right now, like who are those people? And we thought, well, it's definitely not a look, right? It's not like, oh, that dude's Asian, black, white. It's like it's that certain mentality that people have, that they see something, they're going to chase it, whether it's a fighter that wants to be at the top of his game, or a lawyer that wants to be a partner, or, you know, whatever it may be. It's like we want folks that drink the tequila and, you know, plug in with our brand to be those types of people that hunt for something. They're not afraid to go out and know that they can come back home empty-handed, but that doesn't stop them from trying to eat, you know? And that's kind of my like brand speak.
Stop selling me on this stuff. Yeah. I want 10 bottles
so,
right now.
Yeah, $82.99 a bottle.
Yeah, right. I mean, honestly, like, you know, in I think especially now, like you see in more and more, like people are really willing to spend on quality. I think that consumers are sick and tired of paying for shit.
Yeah.
Like we paid for shit for so long.
Yeah.
You know, we've paid for shit tequila. We've paid for shit whiskey for such a long time. Yep. Shit alcohol. You know, and I think that it's like in a way they're fighting back. Like we're forcing you to be better. I think that's where like social media and Google and the reviews and stuff like that are kind of coming into play, because it's like everyone's exposed. You are exposed now.
Yeah, man.
You have shit. People are gonna know today that you are shit.
Oh yeah.
And I think that even going into the name, which just hearing you talk about that, boiling down just to the name. Some people are just focused on the name. We're like, hey, I have a cool name. The alcohol is shit. But it's like you focus on the quality of that.
Yeah.
And then it's like almost like the name comes second in a sense. You know, it's like there's a lot of thought that goes into it. And it's a badass name.
And for us, it's we put the people first. You know, and that's why we really wanted to be careful of celebrity endorsements. And I'm not saying, you know, we're not anti-celebrity. I'll put that right up there. We want to be the brand for people that want to be somebody, you know, and work towards it. Like, yes, and celebrity endorsements and people that have made it, awesome, man. Like we want that too, but we want to be literally the liquid that gets people to a point where it's like, okay, I want to be somebody. How am I going to achieve? Like it's that type of mentality. Now I'm not saying they got to drink our stuff to be that person, but we've really differentiated ourselves because we're not a tequila company. Even how we're structured with our investors, we're not a tequila company. We're a conglomerate, brand conglomerate, and what it boils down to is people. What do they want? You know, and if it's not tequila, it could be this. And I wish I could share with you what we're launching. But certain things that build into a lifestyle of the hunt. Like for me, you know, and I know I just drank a little bit, but I don't drink, right? And we're coming out with something that for me, I can still partake in that, but still be part of the brand, you know, to somebody that does drink. Um, and I think that's really important because you want to be there for the people because they're the ones that go and place their hard-earned dollars into your brand, and you have to do them the service of providing the best thing that you can provide them, you know. And for us, like our price point, people drink and they're like, man, how much is this stuff? And you're like, same as the other crap that you're drinking. And they're like, how's that possible? It's like, we just spent time and energy and, you know, we didn't take shortcuts because it can be done, right?
Mm-hmm.
It can be done. And a lot of brands out there that are crap tequilas, they have that big price point because they want that ginormous profit because they're not people first. You know, they're company first and profit first. And I'm not saying profit's not important. Profit's extremely important. But there's a point where you can compromise on that a little bit and say, hey, what are we truly doing to signal to people that we want to be there for them? That's why we have this kind of saying at La Caza that we want to be aspirational but attainable, man. We don't want to be pretentious. You know, we don't want to be, it's like, oh, you do this and here's that guy over there like flying on a jet. And it's like, that's not who we want to be. We want to be the folks that you go into the gym, you know, and I'm just using the gym as an example. And it's like you see this dude that is humble. He's working his butt off. He's strong as hell. He's kicking people's ass. And then he walks off that mat and you're like, you talk to him, you're like, man, that dude's an awesome guy, right? Like he's got his shit together. Like that's the type of people that we want to associate with the brand.
It's all about like quality and nurturing and playing the long game with it. You know, I think that it's just not like it's not like the fast food mindset of like alcohol. You guys are like take a lot of time. It took 8 years to develop this. It took a lot of time probably to come up with a name. And in even how you explain that, that's not something that you just winged it. It's something that you put a lot of time into thinking about that to even talk on this podcast. So it just seems like you guys are really nurturing this thing. And I think that's, if you just take that same concept and just, you know, 10x it, 2x it, 10x it over the course of 10, 15, 20 years, this could be one of the best brands in the world, you know?
And that's where we want to get to, you know, and I know people are like, oh, okay, you know, you guys are dreaming pretty big, but man, you have to dream big. You have to have some type of goal for yourself, you know, because if you don't, you're just meandering. Like, and I'm always relating it back to fighting, but you know, you take some of the best fighters in the world, when they set out on their journey, they're like, I'm going to be champion one day, right? So they knew their goal, they knew what they had to do. And for us, you know, we know what that goal is, and we know how to get there and what we need to do. It's going to be hard. It's going to take a lot of time, you know. And, you know, I think people always look at it as, oh, it's like you said, must be nice. Like, oh, you guys are kind of like running around drinking tequila in Mexico and all that. And it's like, well, you wouldn't say that if I told you that we're putting up our house as collateral, right? Or, you know, there's certain times where like money's tight and you got to do this or you got to do that. Like nobody talks about that, right? Nobody talks about, hey, we got an investor meeting and, you know, if we don't do this, like there's going to be whatever, something's going to happen. Like, all right, when's the investor meeting? Tomorrow. All right, I'm going to spend $2,000 of my own money to book a flight, run down there. Like, nobody talks about that. You know, nobody talks about those moments in the gym where nobody's there and you're hitting that bag and you know, you're putting in the work. Nobody sees that. Nobody gives you credit for that.
They just see the highlight reels,
Correct.
and it's tough because I was talking to Alex yesterday about this. Like those aren't the things that are the sexy things, you
Yeah.
know. Like the highlight reels, everyone wants to see that. They want to see the good stuff, you
Yeah.
know. But like you know, it's like there's not a lot of engagement on all the grind that goes into it. It's just like I want to see like the end result, and you know, you guys clearly put in a lot of time for that. So it's awesome, man. Like and I you know, I just know it's like as long as you keep that mindset, there's only one way this thing's gonna go, and it's
Yeah.
gonna go up.
Yeah. It's been fun, man, and I hope it's not the last thing that we launch. You know, we've got some pretty cool products and some other brands that we're working on, but that's kind of our flagship right now. But it's the mentality, man, and again, it's just like anything in life, and you know, but I've kind of found myself focused on what we call regulated or high risk commodities. That's just kind of my spiel, but I think it's kind of an industry that it's very high risk, high reward, and I think it's just like anything in life, even fighting. It's like, yeah, you got to risk a lot. You got to risk your own body, you know, to get there, and kind of like fighting. Everyone's like, oh yeah, it must have been super fun and all that. It's like, man, it wasn't fun when my mouth was
Right,
broken, you know?
right.
It's like, but again, I'm gonna butcher this saying. It's like, in order for you to be in front of thousands or something like that, you got to be willing to work in front of nobody.
Right.
I don't even know what the actual quote is, but it's very true, you know. And I think when I was fighting and training very hard, and you know, you're kind of on the metro, or, you know, the metro is what the railway is in DC. But man, at the end of the day, you're sweating, you're feeling like crap, you're starving, and you know it's 10 o'clock at night. You still got to go back home and do your homework and cook yourself food and all that, and you're sitting on there on that train by yourself. You're like, it kind of takes a certain mentality to say, man, this sucks, but I'm gonna make it, you know. And I there's like all these different points in my life where I had those moments, and one of those moments I remember it, you know, clear as this glass. You know, I had just finished up my fifth fight, you know, and at that point I came out of that with a broken jaw, and you know, I still had to teach, I still had to work, I still had to go to school. Like life didn't revolve around me. Like, oh, poor Andy, you know, this shit happened to him, so we gotta cater to him. It's like, you know, I was sitting on that train, and I was looking at the mirror, and I had my head against that window, and I kind of just like looked at myself, and I'm like, kind of had that internal talk. Was like, hey brother, like you're gonna get through this, but if you think that this is hard right now, like you have no idea, you know. And it was almost me giving myself
Mhm.
a silent pep talk in my head. I'm like, you know, you're complaining right now, your jaw's hurting. It's like, dude, like that's a physical pain, man. Like don't be a little bitch. Like you just got to buck up, you know. And I remember that moment, and it just stuck with me, you know. And I feel like after that, it was like a whole new Andy going into, you know, into my life, because at the end of the day, it's like everybody says they want to support you and they want to do all these things, and at the time that you need people the most, sometimes the only person that you can rely on is yourself. And
Yep,
that
I
was a
agree.
big realization. And it's not that people don't want to support you, but they have their lives as well, you know. And you can't fault people for not being there at certain times because they got their own shit to do, you know. So it was a big revelation for me that was like, hey, like you gotta buck up, man. Um, and
Lifelong fighter, man. You know, it's like
yeah,
you said that
it's
you don't stop fighting when you know when your sanctioned fights are over. It's
yeah,
like you just continue doing that, you know,
yeah,
and taking that same concept, be like, I know how to handle this. You know, I know when to pivot. I know when to change my game plan a little
yep,
bit. You
yep,
know, and that's all about being a fighter.
100%, man. And you know, I really attribute this to my coach because he, you know, he told me, he's like, man, always act like you've been there, and when you succeed or you have these moments of success, like you're really check yourself and say to yourself, okay, I have some success, but is this really where, you know, where I want to be, or what's that next step, you know? And for me, like I've actually I never had celebrated any of my wins because for me it was like, you know, I went home and I'm like, all right, what's next, you know? And, man, I remember my last fight, you know, I was driving this like really crappy stick shift, you know, and I'm like, I got a bag of ice on my knee and like, you know, I'm just all banged up and I'm like trying to drive it, you know, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, all right, cool. I won. It was cool. People were cheering. It's like, man, I'm still driving myself back home. You know, I still got shit to do.
Yeah.
Like, and it's one of those things where you just having successes is awesome. You know, it's a proof of concept. It's a proof of what I call proof of progress, right? It's like you're progressing, but if you're not at your goal yet, that win truly is not really a win. It's just a milestone. But yeah, it's kind of like bringing up all these memories. It's like I haven't, you know, even talked about or even thought about them for, geez, like 10 years now, you know, 10 or plus years. So it's like, but yeah, I remember those days like it was like yesterday, you know, but man, it's just defined who I am and I just don't know who I'm, you know, how it's going to define me in the future, but I know it's just got such a huge impact. So
Yeah, man. I mean, I think, I feel like we could have 20 of these. You know, I think that, you know, just have you on for the next 10 podcasts. I think there's so much that we could talk about, you know, and it's, and I love seeing it. Like one of the reasons why we want to start doing this is not just for the gym. It's a selfish reason because I've met a lot of great people and I love hearing their stories. And it does motivate me. Part of the selfish reason is because I a lot of times I get discouraged with myself. I feel like that I, you know, kind of want to quit sometimes and give it up. And I just love being able to hear these stories of like people that have a lot of common failures that I've had. And and I love seeing people that are doing like what I would aspire to do in my life. And I love it. It's you know, kind of where I'm evolving right now with my job. And it's like, I love to be able to just, you know, have a lot of guests like yourself on and have you back again, because, you know, if we could get you back on again after, you know, maybe even the next venture, I think that would be awesome.
I love it, man.
So yeah, I think that everything went great, man. And I appreciate you coming on. You got a lot of great stuff going on, and it's very thankful that you took your time out of your day and to help sit down here and talk with us on this podcast when we're just, you know, getting started ourselves.
Absolutely.
And hopefully this could be a little bit bigger at one point as well. So
Well, hey man, I mean, you guys got to look back at your successes too, you know, and I haven't known you for that long, but just walking into the well, I guess as we call it the old gym now, but man, even, you know, 3 years ago when I walked in and met you, like you came out, said, "Hey, I'm Mike, you know, like how can I help? What are you doing?" And I remember like you putting up some swag and like trying to sell the bars, and you're like, "Hey, I'm just trying to build this business, bro." Like, dude,
Yeah.
I love that, you know.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, I walked in here, I'm like, holy crap, like this is sick. And you know, I love seeing that progress for people because it just really makes me happy of like, all right, there's other folks out there grinding and there's that community in that. You know, there's guys out there that are, you know, grinding their dicks in the dirt. That's what we said in the office, but grinding their dicks in
true.
the dirt. And it's just like, it's lonely, but then it's just like fighting. It's like, it's kind of like a team sport in a sense, but it's an individual sport. But that's why that camaraderie and that brotherhood's so strong. It's like, it's all an individual performance, but we all know what it takes and like how hard it is. So that's kind of what brings people together. And it's nothing different here. You know, you guys are doing such a killer job. So thank you. I know that was long winded, but it's been fun, man.
Yeah, I appreciate having you on, man, and look forward to, we're going to have you on again for sure. And, you know, there's, JP was, you know, mentioning that there's some other people that, you know, might benefit from being on here as well too.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think that would be great that we could talk about that as well and, you know, get this thing rolling, man. So, yeah, thanks for coming on, man.
I love it, dude.
All right.
Thanks, man.